So I'm John Palmer from the Hopkinton Historical Society, and I have a very interesting presentation today. It's a little different. It's not an article or artifacts that we have in the Historical Society. It's rather a story about a locale in Hopkinton and about people that lived at that locale and their life. Anyways, there's a very special place on the east side of Hopkinton known as Magunko Hill. This locale was the home of some particularly famous inhabitants. The first settlers there were native Indians from area tribes that the preacher John Eliot formed into a clan of Christian praying Indians in the 1660s. He followed the model of the native praying Indians, a tribe that he also dealt with. Anyways, the Reverend Eliot instructed these natives in the teachings of God, and he also taught them useful human skills such as making cedar shingles and clapboards. The settlement had the name of Magunko, which means place of great trees. To further the success of Magunko, the colonial government of Massachusetts gave to the Indians 1,000 acres in 1669. The land was here, it's on this circle land. This is Magunko Hill. The superintendent of Indian Affairs reported that there were 55 natives comprising 11 families living in the Magunko village. Sadly, a particularly non-Christian event occurred on February 1, 1676, that caused the death of this settlement. That day, Nidus, an Indian, and 5 of his companions attacked the home of Thomas Eames near Farm Pond in Framingham. Mr. Eames was away at the time, but his wife and 9 of their children were at home. In the fight that followed, Mrs. Eames and 4 of her children were killed. A posse of white men pursued the attackers, caught 5 of the 6. Nidus, the leader, and another attacker were killed by the posse, and the remaining attackers were apprehended, tried, and executed in September 1676. This tragic event led to the imprisonment of the balance of the Magunko, the innocent Magunko villagers. They were imprisoned on Deer Island in Boston Harbor for several years. Many, probably most, died there, and the few that survived subsequently joined up with the native praying Indians, and they were forced to cede to the native Indians their Magunko Hill property. In 1715, the native Indians sold the Magunko acreage to the trustees of Edward Hopkins. The name Hopkins should be familiar. It's where the town of Hopkinton got its name, Edward Hopkins. Anyways, this land, together with additional acreage granted by the colonial Massachusetts government, became incorporated as the town of Hopkinton. Today, Magunko Hill is actually in Ashland, a town that was incorporated in 1646. But all the events in this story precede that date, and thus they all occurred in Hopkinton. Hopkinton's most illustrious resident was Sir Charles Henry Franklin, Baronet. He arrived here in 1751 when he purchased a large number of acres encompassing a substantial portion of Magunko Hill as the site for a country home. The Franklin family is among England's most notable and respected. A photo of Sir Harry and the Franklin family insignia are shown here. Sir Harry was born in Bengal, India on May 10, 1716. At that time, his father was there serving as the governor of the British East India Company. His mother was Elizabeth Cross Franklin, who was a direct descendant of Oliver Cromwell, the famous Oliver Cromwell. At age 22, when his uncle died, Charles Henry Franklin inherited the Franklin family estate in England, along with the titles of Sir and Baronet. This goes with the class of the society that they belong to. They're called landed gentry. From this time on, Harry was referred to as Sir Harry. 2 years later, the King of England appointed Sir Harry as the customs collector for the Port of Boston. This was a highly sought-after position. His duties began in the fall of 1741 at the old Boston Custom House, and he soon made the acquaintance of many other English gentlemen appointed to administer colonial Massachusetts. In particular, he developed a strong relationship with the then rector of King's Chapel, the Reverend Dr. Roger Price. It was Reverend Price who later introduced Franklin to Hopkinton. This is a photo of King's Chapel. Sir Harry was a major contributor to Dr. Price for the restoration of the King's Chapel. It was formerly a wooden structure, and it was in bad disrepair. And Roger Price had this present chapel constructed. In 1742, Sir Harry paid a visit to the town of Marblehead, where his jurisdiction as customs collector extended. At that time, Marblehead Harbor was a very busy seaport, and he had a particular business matter that he had to attend to. When his business had been completed, Sir Harry was directed to the Fountain Inn in Marblehead for some refreshment. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and nobody was there except for a young service maiden in bare feet, scrubbing the floor. She was 16 years old and was extremely beautiful. The legend is that Sir Harry felt an instant attraction to her. This is a photo of the Fountain Inn, and this is a picture or a sketch of the maiden, which we would call her Lady Agnes, but her name was Agnes Surridge. So Harry had asked her name. She said it was Agnes Surridge, and he gave her a crown, an English crown, to buy a pair of shoes and stockings. A month or two later, Harry Franklin returned to Marblehead on additional business, and he stopped by again to the Fountain Inn. Agnes was still there and was still in bare feet. He wanted to know why she had not purchased shoes with the money he had given her. And she said that, in fact, she did buy a pair of shoes and stockings, but only wears them to the meeting house on Sundays. This is a sketch of Sir Harry looking at Lady Agnes's bare feet. Kind of interesting. Anyways, he became further infatuated with her to such an extent that he went to the home of her parents, Edward and Mary Surridge, upright people of ordinary means, and sought their permission to bring Agnes to Boston to receive a proper education. After consulting a while with the Reverend Edward Holyoke of Marblehead about this proposal, they eventually agreed to it. Agnes went to Boston for her quote-unquote education that spanned several years. It's believed that she lived with and was guided by the wife of Massachusetts colonial governor Shirley. Governor Shirley was a close ally of Sir Charles Henry Franklin. Agnes was taught reading, writing, grammar, music, dancing, embroidery, and whatever graces and accomplishments were thought requisite to form a fashionable and perfect lady. This next sketch is Agnes taking piano lessons. By the summer of 1746, Agnes was living with Sir Harry in Boston and would accompany him to various ceremonial and social affairs as dictated by his lofty position. So here's a sketch of both Harry and Agnes. They were clearly in love now, but unfortunately, Sir Harry could not take her hand in marriage because of his high social status. He was a baronet, and her lower class, she was just an ordinary person. And living together unmarried proved to be an offensive source of tension and irritation with the well-bred Bostonians. This tension led Franklin to seek a residential location far away from the rumor mongers in Boston. In the meantime, his friend Roger Price had resigned as rector of King's Chapel and had purchased a large number of acres in downtown Hopkinton, at that time a very quiet rural town, with the intention of establishing the Anglican faith here. Dr. Price ended up founding St. Paul's Episcopal Church of Hopkinton in 1735. Encouraged by this, Sir Harry Franklin sought out Hopkinton as the site for his country home, and as mentioned, purchased a large number of acres on the southwest slope of Magunko Hill in 1751 for this purpose. This is another sketch of Magunko Hill. Here's Magunko Hill here. And here's some of the land that was bought by Sir Charles this is the west and this is the southwest slope of Magunko Hill. The majority of this land was bought from a Captain James Gooch, whose home at Magunko had been destroyed by fire a few years earlier in 1743. Construction of Franklin Manor began in 1753 and was completed about 2 years later. During the construction, Sir Harry and Lady Agnes rented the house that belonged to Reverend Price in downtown Hopkinton. This is a picture of the Price Manor in downtown Hopkinton, and it's at the top of the hill near the Doughboy. It's no longer there, but beautiful home. Sir Charles's aim was to build a great place of beauty and refinement that would become the showplace of the country. He oversaw its siting, landscaping, architecture. Elias Nason, who was also a minister in Hopkinton and a local historian, knew the mansion, new Franklin Mansion well, and this is what he said of it. The mansion was a large, well-built, three-story structure situated on the south side of the hill, set somewhat back from the Old County Road. On the first floor were two great halls, each supported by fluted columns and decorated with ornate, deep green tapestries. The east side hall was called the music room, and on the opposite side was the reception room. In between was a grand circular staircase. The fireplaces were adorned with finely carved imported marble. Extending to the rear of the first floor were a large kitchen and dining room that could seat 50 people. The second and third floors contained bedrooms and servant quarters. The grounds of the estate were elaborate. In front were a series of terraced gardens that featured many imported flowers and shrubs. On the hillside to the rear was a formal garden containing boxwood hedges, honeysuckle, and lilac trees. Orchards of apples, pears, plums, peaches, cherries, apricots, and quinces were planted. Today, only the remains of one of the front terraces is partially visible. This picture shows the house, Franklin Manor, and you can see the sloping down. These are terraces that were constructed by the workers on the estate. This story continues on. Probably the most exciting part of, or the most interesting part of the story is yet to come. We will talk about that on our next segment. So in the meantime, I'm John Palmer, and this is Hidden Treasures.